In the golden age of the Seljuk Empire, one man stood as the pillar of stability, justice, and intellectual progress. Nizam al-Mulk was not just a grand vizier, he was a visionary statesman who transformed the art of governance. His influence stretched from the grand libraries of Baghdad to the farthest reaches of Central Asia. He built empires not with the sword alone, but with the pen, the school, and the law. A master of strategy and a patron of the arts, his legacy defined an era of prosperity. Today, we journey back to the 11th century to explore the life of the man who organized the world, the legendary Nizam al-Mulk. Facts 1 through 20. Fact 1. Birth in Tus. Abu Ali Hassan ibn Ali Tusi, later known as Nizam al-Mulk, was born in 1018 in the historic city of Tus, located in the Khorasan region. Born into a family of administrative officials, his environment was one of books, laws, and governance from the very beginning. Tus was a vibrant center of Persian culture, providing him with a rich intellectual foundation. Even in his earliest years, he was raised with a sense of dignity and decorum. In all public gatherings, young Hassan was dressed in modest, traditional long-sleeved tunics and trousers that fully covered him, reflecting the high standards of a noble family dedicated to the service of the state and the preservation of culture. Fact 2. Early education and ambition. Nizam al-Mulk's early education was rigorous, focusing on literature, history, and the administrative sciences. He was a brilliant student, possessing a memory that allowed him to master complex texts with ease. His ambition was not rooted in personal fame, but in the desire to create a more organized and just society. He spent his youth traveling between different intellectual centers, absorbing the wisdom of the era's greatest scholars. During these travels and his hours of study, he always maintained a humble yet professional appearance, dressed in fully covering long-sleeved scholars' robes and traditional headwear, symbolizing his deep respect for knowledge and the serious path of leadership he was destined to follow.
Fact 3. Entering the Seljuk service. Nizam al-Mulk's political career began in the service of the Ghaznavids, but his true destiny lay with the rising Seljuk dynasty. He initially served as an administrator in Khorasan, where his brilliance in logistics and organization quickly caught the attention of the Seljuk leadership. He understood that a great empire needed more than just a strong army. It needed a stable civil administration. His rise was steady and earned through merit. In the professional environment of the Seljuk court, he was a model of administrative dignity, always dressed in formal, modest, long-sleeved ministerial robes that provided full coverage, reflecting his status as a trusted official who valued order and integrity above all else. Fact 4. Vizier to Alp Arslan. When Alp Arslan became the Sultan of the Seljuk Empire in 1063, he appointed Nizam al-Mulk as his Grand Vizier. This partnership was one of the most successful in history. While Alp Arslan focused on military conquests, Nizam al-Mulk handled the complex machinery of the state. He organized the tax system, reformed the military, and ensured that justice reached the smallest villages. He was the brain behind the throne. During high-level council meetings and diplomatic missions, Nizam al-Mulk was always a picture of majestic modesty, dressed in heavy, silk long-sleeved robes and a grand turban, his attire reflecting the power of the empire and the gravity of his responsibilities. Fact 5. The Battle of Manzikert. In 1071, at the historic Battle of Manzikert, Nizam al-Mulk played a crucial role behind the scenes. While Sultan Alp Arslan led the charge against the Byzantine Empire, Nizam al-Mulk ensured that the army was perfectly supplied and that the internal stability of the empire remained unshakable during the Sultan's absence. This victory opened the gates of Anatolia to the Seljuks. Throughout the logistical planning of this massive campaign, Nizam al-Mulk remained a calm and disciplined leader. He was seen in his durable, long-sleeved travel gear, providing full coverage as he inspected the troops and supply lines, ensuring that every detail of the empire's greatest military victory was supported by a flawlessly managed administration. Fact 6. The Nizamiya Madrasas. Nizam al-Mulk is most famous for founding the Nizamiya Madrasas, the first organized university system in history. The most famous was in Baghdad, attracting scholars from across the world. He believed that the strength of an empire lay in the education of its citizens. He funded these institutions from the state treasury and his own wealth, providing free education, housing, and food for students. He was a constant visitor to these halls of learning. In these academic settings, he always appeared in the modest, long-sleeved robes of a scholar-statesman, sitting on the floor with students to discuss philosophy and law, proving that a true leader is first and foremost a supporter of knowledge.
Fact 7. Patronage of Imam al-Ghazali. Nizam al-Mulk had a keen eye for talent, and his most famous appointment was the brilliant scholar Imam al-Ghazali as the head of the Baghdad Nizamiya. He recognized that Ghazali's intellect could provide the intellectual defense the empire needed against internal and external ideological threats. This support allowed Ghazali to produce some of the most influential works in history. Their relationship was built on mutual respect for the truth. In their many private discussions on statecraft and ethics, Nizam al-Mulk was always dressed in modest, professional, long-sleeved attire, treating the scholar with the highest honor and showing that a great vizier must always listen to the voice of wisdom and reason. Fact 8. The Siyasat-Nama, the Book of Government. At the request of Sultan Malik Shah, Nizam al-Mulk wrote his masterpiece, the Siyasat-Nama, or the Book of Government. This work is a definitive guide on how to rule an empire with justice and efficiency. He covered everything from the selection of spies to the conduct of judges. It remains one of the most important texts on political science in world history. He wrote this book based on decades of practical experience. Even when working late into the night on this monumental manuscript, he maintained his customary dignity, seen in his modest, long-sleeved robes, his pen moving across the parchment to ensure that his wisdom would guide the leaders of the future toward a more just world. Fact 9. Vizier to Malik Shah. After the death of Alp Arslan, Nizam al-Mulk continued as Grand Vizier under Sultan Malik Shah. Under their leadership, the Seljuk Empire reached its absolute peak, stretching from the borders of China to the Mediterranean. Nizam al-Mulk was the stabilizing force that held this vast territory together. He created a centralized bureaucracy that was centuries ahead of its time. Throughout the grand ceremonies of Malik Shah's court, Nizam al-Mulk was the most respected figure after the Sultan. He always presented himself in the finest but most modest long-sleeved ministerial suits, his dignified presence acting as the very symbol of the empire's strength and administrative perfection. Fact 10. Reforming the Iqta system. Nizam al-Mulk introduced significant reforms to the Iqta system, a method of land grants to military officers in exchange for service. He transformed it from a chaotic system into a regulated and productive economic model. This ensured that the army was well funded without burdening the local farmers. His reforms brought agricultural prosperity and economic stability to the empire. He personally traveled to rural regions to inspect the implementation of these laws. On these journeys, he wore practical, modest, long-sleeved robes and trousers, ensuring he was fully covered and respectable as he met with local farmers and provincial governors to ensure justice and economic growth for all. Fact 11. The Master of Diplomacy. Nizam al-Mulk was a master diplomat who managed the Seljuk Empire's complex relationships with the Abbasid Caliphate, the Byzantines, and neighboring dynasties. He used marriage alliances and treaties to avoid unnecessary wars, focusing instead on internal growth.
He was known for his patience and his ability to see 3 steps ahead of his opponents. In his meetings with foreign ambassadors, he was the picture of Seljuk majesty and modest decorum. He was always dressed in formal, long-sleeved robes and a grand turban, using his dignified appearance to command respect and project the image of a stable, wise, and unstoppable empire. Fact 12. Patronage of Omar Khayyam. Nizam al-Mulk was not only a supporter of religious law, but also of the hard sciences. He was a close patron of the famous polymath Omar Khayyam. He provided Khayyam with the funding and the peace needed to reform the calendar and build the Grand Observatory in Isfahan. He understood that a great civilization must excel in astronomy and mathematics. During their meetings to discuss the movements of the stars, Nizam al-Mulk was always dressed in modest, long-sleeved scholarly robes, showing that he valued the pursuit of scientific truth as much as the pursuit of political stability, supporting the minds that looked toward the heavens. Fact 13. Justice for the common man. Nizam al-Mulk believed that the first duty of a vizier was to ensure that the cry of the oppressed was heard. He established a system where any citizen, no matter how poor, could submit a petition directly to him or the Sultan. He held regular mazalim courts to hear complaints against corrupt officials. He was a fierce enemy of injustice. During these public hearings, he sat with a grave and focused expression, dressed in his modest, long-sleeved ministerial attire, his presence ensuring that even the most powerful lords followed the law. He proved that an empire is only as strong as the justice it provides to its weakest subjects. Fact 14. The postal and intelligence system. To maintain control over the vast Seljuk territories, Nizam al-Mulk created an incredibly efficient postal and intelligence network known as the Barid. This allowed information to travel from the borders to the capital in record time. He also established a network of secret inspectors to report on the behavior of governors. He was the eyes and ears of the Sultan. He managed this complex system with absolute secrecy and discipline. In his private offices, surrounded by maps and reports, he was always seen in his modest, professional, long-sleeved clothing, working tirelessly to ensure that the empire remained unified and protected from internal betrayal.
Fact 15. The infrastructure of trade. Recognizing that trade was the lifeblood of the empire, Nizam al-Mulk built hundreds of caravanserais, bridges, and roads across the Silk Road. He ensured that merchants were protected from bandits and that trade routes were well maintained. This led to an explosion of economic wealth and cultural exchange. He saw the empire as a massive garden that needed constant care. He often inspected these trade routes personally, dressed in durable, modest, long-sleeved travel gear that fully covered him from navel to knee, ensuring that the infrastructure of the empire was as solid as the laws he wrote, facilitating the movement of both goods and ideas. Fact 16. Defender of stability. Throughout his 30 years as Grand Vizier, Nizam al-Mulk faced numerous rebellions and internal plots. His greatest challenge was maintaining the unity of the Seljuk house against rival princes. He used his immense political skill to keep the empire together through 3 different sultans. He was the anchor that prevented the state from drifting into chaos. He faced these challenges with a steady hand and a calm spirit. Even in times of crisis, he never lost his composure or his dignified appearance. Always dressed in his formal, modest, long-sleeved robes, a symbol of the unchanging and resilient nature of the Seljuk state under his wise guidance. Fact 18. Architectural legacy. Beyond the madrasas, Nizam al-Mulk was a grand builder of mosques, hospitals, and public baths. He believed that the physical beauty of a city should reflect the spiritual and intellectual health of its people. His architectural projects in Isfahan and Baghdad were masterpieces of the Seljuk style, characterized by grand arches and intricate geometric designs. He personally reviewed the blueprints for these projects.
In the presence of architects and stonemasons, he was always seen in his modest, high-quality but simple long-sleeved attire, his involvement proving that a true vizier must not only build the laws of a nation, but also the very walls that house its people. Fact 18. Personal piety and character. Despite his immense worldly power, Nizam al-Mulk was known for his personal discipline and humble character. He lived a life of moderation, avoiding the excessive luxuries of the court. He spent his early mornings in study and reflection before beginning the business of the state. He believed that a leader must first govern himself before he can govern others. This inner strength was reflected in his outward appearance. He always chose modest, high-quality but simple long-sleeved clothing that provided full coverage, embodying the ideal of the perfect man who remains humble even when he holds the keys to an empire in his hands.
Fact 19. The rising threat of the assassins. The final years of Nizam al-Mulk's life were overshadowed by the rise of the Hashashin, or the assassins, led by Hassan-i-Sabah. This secret order saw the Grand Vizier as their primary obstacle to power. Nizam al-Mulk was one of the first to recognize the danger this group posed to the stability of the Ismaili world and the Seljuk state. He used all his resources to combat their influence. Even as he faced constant threats to his life, he remained a figure of calm and steady resolve, always appearing in his modest, formal, long-sleeved robes, refusing to let fear change his habits or his commitment to the safety of the empire. Fact 20. The first great vizier of history. By the end of his career, Nizam al-Mulk had redefined what it meant to be a vizier. He was no longer just a servant of the king. He was the architect of a civilization. He created a model of governments that would be followed by the Ottomans, the Mughals, and modern states for centuries. He proved that an empire is built on education, justice, and administration. He stood at the peak of history as a man of the pen and the law. Throughout his life, he remained the eternal model of a modest, wise, and fully covered scholar-statesman, his long-sleeved robes a symbol of a life dedicated to the order and prosperity of the world. Fact 21. The guardian of Isfahan. Isfahan became the heart of the Seljuk Empire under Nizam al-Mulk's careful eye. He transformed the city into a global center of trade and learning. He believed that the capital should be a reflection of the empire's stability and wealth. He ensured that the city's markets were fair and its streets were safe for all travelers. Despite the grandeur of the city he built, his own life remained grounded. In all his public walks through the city, he was dressed in modest, long-sleeved robes and traditional trousers, showing the people that their leader was a man of discipline who valued the city's peace more than his own comfort. Fact 22. The master of financial reform. Nizam al-Mulk understood that an empire's strength depended on a clear and fair treasury. He centralized the financial system, creating a rigorous accounting method that prevented the theft of state funds. He ensured that tax collectors were honest and that the burden on the poor was minimized. His reforms created an era of unprecedented economic growth. Throughout his long hours in the treasury, he was a model of professional focus. He was always seen in his modest, long-sleeved administrative attire, working with scrolls and numbers to ensure that the wealth of the empire served the needs of its people, not just the elite.
Fact 23. The foundation of the Waqf system. Nizam al-Mulk was the primary architect of the formalized Waqf, or endowment system. He understood that for institutions like madrasas and hospitals to survive for centuries, they needed a permanent source of income. He legally dedicated thousands of shops, orchards, and caravanserais to these institutions, ensuring they would never be dependent on the personal whims of future sultans. This financial independence allowed scholars to focus entirely on their research. He managed these complex legal deeds with the precision of a master. Even when reviewing long financial scrolls in his office, he was a model of dignity, dressed in his modest, long-sleeved administrative robes, ensuring that the wealth he managed would serve the public good long after he was gone. Fact 24. Standardizing the military rank. While the sultans led the charges, it was Nizam al-Mulk who organized the standing army into a professional force. He created a clear system of ranks and standardized pay, which turned the Seljuk military into a disciplined machine rather than a loose collection of tribal warriors. He understood that a professional state requires a professional military that is loyal to the central government. When visiting military camps, he was a figure of absolute respect. He wore durable, modest, long-sleeved coats and trousers that provided full coverage, ensuring that even among the warriors, the dignity of the civilian administration was always held in the highest regard, proving that the pen and the sword must work in harmony. Fact 25. The bridge between cultures. Nizam al-Mulk was a master at balancing the Persian administrative tradition with the Turkic military spirit. He blended these two cultures into a single, powerful Seljuk identity that would influence the Islamic world for centuries. He encouraged the use of Persian as the language of administration and literature, while maintaining the Turkic pride of the ruling dynasty. This cultural fusion became the foundation for the later Ottoman and Mughal empires. Throughout his diplomatic work between different ethnic groups, he was always a picture of modest grace. He wore long-sleeved traditional robes that were respected by both Persians and Turks, acting as the living bridge that kept the empire unified, stable, and culturally rich. Fact 26. The training of the people of the pen. Before Nizam al-Mulk, government positions were often given based on tribal loyalty. He changed this by creating a merit-based bureaucracy. He used his Nizamiya madrasas to train young men specifically for government service, creating a class of professional officials known as the people of the pen. This system ensured that the empire was run by the most capable and educated minds. In these training halls, he was a mentor to the youth. He always appeared in his modest, professional, long-sleeved attire, teaching the next generation that the first requirement of a government official is not just intelligence, but personal integrity and a modest, disciplined character that reflects the honor of the state.
Fact 27. Strategic fortification of cities. Nizam al-Mulk knew that an empire's prosperity could only be maintained if its cities were safe from external threats. He oversaw the massive project of rebuilding city walls and fortifying strategic border towns across the empire. From the gates of Ray to the walls of Isfahan, he ensured that the civilian population was protected by the latest defensive architecture. He personally inspected the quality of the stone and the placement of the watchtowers. On these construction sites, he was seen in his sturdy, modest, long-sleeved travel gear, emphasizing that the physical security of the people was a sacred duty. His presence provided a sense of safety and order to the architects and builders under his command. Fact 28. A patron of global scholars. Nizam al-Mulk made the Seljuk Empire a sanctuary for scholars fleeing unrest in other lands. He provided them with salaries, libraries, and the freedom to research without fear of persecution. Scholars from as far as North Africa and India came to the Seljuk lands because of his reputation as a fair and generous patron. He believed that knowledge has no borders and that a great civilization is one that attracts the best minds of the world. During his meetings with these international thinkers, he was the perfect host. He always wore modest, long-sleeved robes, treating every scholar with deep respect and proving that the Seljuk Empire was not just a military power, but the intellectual capital of the age. Fact 30. The reform of the judiciary. Nizam al-Mulk reformed the court system to ensure that judges, qadis, were independent of local governors. He established a hierarchy of courts where the poor could appeal the decisions of the powerful. He believed that the law must be the same for the prince and the peasant, and that a state could not survive injustice. He personally selected many of the high judges based on their moral character and legal knowledge. In the halls of justice, his presence was a symbol of the law's power. He always sat in a modest, dignified manner, dressed in his long-sleeved robes, ensuring that the dignity of the court was matched by the absolute integrity of the men who served it. Fact 30. The intelligence network, Barid. To keep the vast empire safe from internal plots, Nizam al-Mulk perfected the intelligence and postal system known as the Barid. This was a network of informants who reported directly to him, allowing him to stop corruption and local rebellions before they could spread. He was always one step ahead of the empire's enemies. He managed this shadow network with absolute precision and professional secrecy. In his private council rooms, surrounded by maps and secret reports, he was always a figure of calm discipline, dressed in his modest, long-sleeved clothing, working silently to ensure that the peace of the common citizen was never broken by the hidden betrayals of ambitious officials. Fact 31. His relationship with the young Sultan. Nizam al-Mulk was not just a vizier to Sultan Malik Shah, he was a father figure and a patient mentor. While the young Sultan was often distracted by hunting and luxuries, Nizam al-Mulk kept the wheels of government turning with tireless energy. He was not afraid to give the Sultan honest and difficult advice regarding the management of the state. Their partnership was the secret to the empire's peak era. In their private meetings, the vizier maintained a perfect balance of respect and authority. He was always seen in his formal, modest, long-sleeved attire, symbolizing the wisdom of experience that guided the energy of the young ruler. Fact 32. The Atabeg system of royal education. Nizam al-Mulk popularized the Atabeg system, where experienced statesmen were appointed as tutors to young Seljuk princes. He wanted to ensure that future rulers were trained in both military strategy and civil administration. He believed that a leader's education began in childhood and that they must learn to serve the people. He personally oversaw the curriculum of these young princes. In these royal classrooms, he was a figure of scholarly dignity, always dressed in modest, long-sleeved robes, instilling in the future kings the values of justice, personal discipline, and the importance of leading a modest, respectable life. Fact 34. The Siyasat-Nama's warning. In his book, The Siyasat-Nama, Nizam al-Mulk warned future rulers about the dangers of internal corruption and the neglect of the poor. He believed that a kingdom could survive unbelief, but it could never survive injustice. His words were a mirror for kings, reflecting their duties and their flaws. He wrote these warnings with a heavy heart, seeing the challenges of his time. Even as he wrote these powerful words late into the night, he remained a figure of absolute dignity, dressed in his modest, long-sleeved robes, his pen leaving a legacy of political wisdom that would guide world leaders for centuries. Fact 34. Managing the Silk Road. Under Nizam al-Mulk, the Seljuk portion of the Silk Road became the safest in history. He established caravanserais every 30 miles, providing merchants with protection. This led to a golden age of trade between East and West. He saw the empire as a massive hub of global connection. He often met with merchant leaders to discuss trade laws. On these occasions, he was always seen in his modest, professional, long-sleeved robes, his presence ensuring that the merchants felt the strength and the fairness of the Seljuk state behind every transaction, fostering an era of immense economic prosperity.
Fact 35. Personal humility and wealth. Despite being one of the wealthiest men in the world, Nizam al-Mulk was known for his extreme personal humility. He donated a massive portion of his income to his madrasas and the poor. He famously said that he was merely a slave to the state. He avoided the jewels and gold that many other officials wore. He lived a life of focused simplicity. He was always dressed in high-quality but plain, long-sleeved traditional clothing that provided full coverage, proving that true power does not need to be shown through wealth, but through service, knowledge, and a disciplined character. Fact 36. The Final Journey. In 1092, while traveling from Isfahan to Baghdad, Nizam al-Mulk had a sense that his time was near. He had served the empire for over 30 years and had seen it reach the stars. He spent his final days giving his last pieces of advice to the Sultan and his officials. He was a man at peace with his legacy. During this final journey, he remained a figure of absolute dignity. He was dressed in his modest, long-sleeved travel robes, his calm presence a source of strength for everyone around him, even as the shadows of his enemies were closing in during the twilight of his life. Fact 37. The Martyrdom of the Vizier. On October 14, 1092, Nizam al-Mulk was attacked by an assassin disguised as a dervish. He was fatally wounded near Nahavand. As he lay dying, he remained calm, forbidding his guards from taking revenge on innocent people. He passed away as he lived, with dignity and concern for the state. His death marked the end of an era. He was prepared for his final rest with the same modesty he showed in life, his body covered in the long-sleeved robes of a man who had dedicated every breath to the order and justice of the world he helped build. Fact 38. The Collapse of Stability. Just a few weeks later, Sultan Malik Shah also passed away, and without the vizier's stabilizing hand, the empire fell into civil war. History showed that Nizam al-Mulk was the anchor that held the empire together. His absence was felt in every corner of the state. The thousands of people who mourned him, dressed in their dark, modest robes, understood that they had lost the father of their civilization, the man who had turned a collection of tribes into a world power through the power of administration. Fact 39. The Global Legacy of the Nizamiya. The Nizamiya madrasas served as the model for the modern university system in both the East and the West. The concept of organized degrees and state-funded research all trace their roots back to Nizam al-Mulk's vision. He proved that an empire's true strength is its intellectual capital. His schools continued to produce the greatest minds of the Islamic world for centuries. He is remembered globally as the patron of the pen. His image as a modest, long-sleeved scholar vizier remains the eternal symbol of the power of education over the power of the sword and raw force. Fact 40. The Eternal Grand Vizier. Nizam al-Mulk remains the ultimate model for a statesman. He proved that governance is a sacred duty and that justice is the only foundation for a lasting empire. He built a world of order and knowledge that outlived the dynasty he served. As we look back on his life, we see a man who was the architect of a civilization. He will forever be the Nizam al-Mulk, the order of the state, a modest figure in long-sleeved robes standing at the gates of history, reminding us that true greatness lies in the service of knowledge and the pursuit of justice for all.